It was in her eyes, the way she looked at me. You could tell that this question was incredibly important. This question was a matter of life and death itself. It was also the last thing in the world I wanted to answer after a long day of school. She reached out, placed her hand on my arm, and with such eloquence, such consideration, it would have made Shakespeare turn over in his grave, said, "Atiya, are you bald?" Really? For the record, I'm not bald. The hair I do have is not neon green or painted UVA colors. On the days that I choose to wear my hijab as a turban, I'm not pulling a quirl and hiding Voldemort. I don't sleep with it on. I don't wear it in the shower. And no, I am not oppressed. I've been wearing the hijab, or headscarf, since 6th grade, of my own volition. So for years, I've struggled with divisive stereotypes that threaten my identity as a human being. I was 11 years old when my English teacher pulled me aside during class and said, "Atiya, don't you feel ugly compared to the other girls with that thing on your head?" I don't feel ugly. In fact, I feel rather beautiful. I was 12 when one of my good friends decided to take it upon herself to apologize on behalf of whatever cruel being out there had forced me to put this on my head, whether that was my dad or my mom. For the record, it was me, so I guess she was apologizing for me. I was 14 when in the hallways of my middle school, someone knocked my books from my hands and called me a terrorist. Someone I didn't know, someone who didn't know me, didn't know what I was like. And I was 15 years old, when in the irony of all ironies, I found a letter in my government notebook, bearing the words, "Go back to where you came from. Kill yourself. Terrorist." It was signed, "Love Jesus." These words were addressed to me, a teenager, like any other, different only because of the fact that I chose to wear upon my head a hijab, a headscarf. Now, to truly understand what a headscarf is, which is the purpose of my talk here today, it's important to take a brief lesson in Arabic semantics, Arabic grammar. Now, in Arabic, words are composed of trilateral roots. That's 3 letters that create a root word that holds meaning for every other word that branches out from that sole root word. So in the case of hijab, the 3 root letters are ha, jim, and ba. When put together, they form the term hajaba, which literally means to conceal or hide from view. So at its base level in the Arabic language, at its root word, the word hijab means modesty. It means concealing. It means hiding from view, whether that means being humble in your daily conversations, whether that means wearing loose clothing, wearing modest clothing, and whether that means putting a scarf upon your head. Now, this idea of the hijab, the headscarf, is not only inherent to women. It's inherent to men as well. It's this idea that Muslim men as well as women lower their gazes. They're humble, they're pious, and they wear loose clothing, clothing that isn't immodest or tight-fitting. It's this idea of finding empowerment through the lack of sexualization within your own body. Now, in today's culture, this idea of modesty is often seen as outmoded or primitive. People hear modesty and think of body shaming, oppression of women, systematic oppression of women. But in reality, Islam's perception of modesty is something that is meant to empower people who carry it out. It's this idea of rejecting the objectification of a body and instead focusing on your individualism, your identity as a person without the sexualized aspects of yourself. Muslim men and women reject sexual objectification and choose instead to be intellectualized, personalized, that we're human beings. And yet, how do you explain this idea of modesty in a world that promotes the sexualization of women and young girls? We live in an age where you have to be sexy in order to fit in or find an attractive other. In order to find an attractive other, you have to compete with the current plastic surgery trends or fashion trends. There's an author named Wendy Shillette, and she wrote a book called Modesty: Recovering the Lost Virtue. And in this book, she writes that modesty is an empowering and yes, feminist tool, whereby women can not only accord themselves self-respect, but also demand respect from others. To say, I'm only showing you what I choose to show you, and the only people who get to see special parts of me are the people who I wish to see those special parts of me. For everyone else, look at my personality, my identity as an individual.